All right, let's be honest. If you are starting a business or expanding an existing one, tax compliance is probably the absolute last thing you want to spend your time doing, right? But here's the reality check. Because Wyoming famously has zero individual or corporate income tax, the state relies heavily on its sales and use tax to keep the lights on and fund public infrastructure. That means they take sales tax collection incredibly seriously. Welcome, everyone. In this explainer, we are going to completely demystify the Wyoming sales tax permit process. We're going to take all the guesswork out of the equation so you can protect your business, stay compliant, and get back to actually running your company.
So you might be wondering, do I even need one of these? Think you don't owe Wyoming sales tax just because you only sell online and don't actually live there? Or, hey, maybe you think that simply registering an LLC in Wyoming automatically hands you a sales tax permit. Well, unfortunately, both of those are very common and very dangerous misconceptions. Whether you run a classic local brick-and-mortar shop or a massive out-of-state e-commerce empire, you very well might be required to collect and remit sales tax directly to the Wyoming Department of Revenue.
And here is the magic number, $100,000. If you hit $100,000 in sales to Wyoming customers, you are legally on the hook. And trust me, one mistake here could literally cost you thousands in back taxes. What's actually kind of interesting about this is how simple the rule is now. Before July of 2024, there was also this confusing 200 transaction threshold. But Wyoming entirely eliminated that. Now, it is strictly about hitting that $100,000 mark in the current or previous calendar year. You cross that line and you absolutely must register.
To make this as easy as possible, here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover the Wyoming tax trap, getting your ducks in a row, a step-by-step registration walkthrough, costly mistakes to avoid, what happens next, and finally, some tips and a disclaimer.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the Wyoming tax trap.
Why does all this matter, and who exactly is caught in this trap? The rules have changed quite a bit recently, and as they say, ignorance of the law definitely won't save you from an audit. It all boils down to one legal concept called nexus. Think of nexus as your business's legal footprint. It's the minimum level of business activity that triggers your tax responsibilities in Wyoming. If you have nexus, you're basically acting as an agent for the state. You collect the tax from the purchaser when they buy your product, and then you just pass it along. That tax money was never actually yours. You're just the middleman, holding on to it for a bit.
There are essentially two ways you can trigger this nexus. You can have a physical presence or an economic presence. Physical nexus is, well, exactly what it sounds like. If you have a physical storefront, a warehouse, some inventory sitting on a shelf, or employees working inside Wyoming, you've got physical nexus, period. Economic nexus, on the other hand, applies to remote sellers. This is where that $100,000 threshold comes into play. If your sales volume into the state hits that number, you've triggered economic nexus, even if you don't have a single employee within 500 miles of Wyoming.
To put that into perspective, let's say you operate a cozy coffee shop or a boutique right in the heart of downtown Sheridan. You clearly have physical nexus and absolutely need a permit to sell taxable goods. But here's the catch. Physical nexus also includes temporarily selling goods at a local weekend craft fair, or even just storing a pallet of your inventory in a Wyoming warehouse. Any tangible physical tie triggers that requirement instantly.
All right, moving right along to Section 2, getting your ducks in a row.
Now that we've figured out if you need a permit, we need to gather some things before you even think about opening your web browser. Seriously, don't be that person whose application time's out halfway through because they had to go hunt for a document. Grab your federal EIN, figure out your exact NAICS industry classification code, and get all your business names and addresses totally squared away. You'll also need a solid estimate of your monthly sales volume in Wyoming, and you need to know your exact legal structure, like are you an LLC, a C Corp, a sole proprietor? Oh, and absolutely make sure you have your bank routing info handy because you're going to need that to pay the registration fee. Which brings us to Section 3, the step-by-step registration walkthrough. Okay, you've got your info, let's do this. I highly recommend doing this digitally rather than relying on snail mail. Wyoming uses an online portal called WYAFS, and the flow is pretty simple. First, you create an account, then, and this is crucial, you wait 3 to 5 days to receive a PIN via email. Once you have that PIN, you log back in, complete the actual application, pay, and then you just wait for your final permit number. So, the big takeaways here? This is not a one-sitting process. You have to wait for that PIN from the Excise Tax Division before you can actually fill out the licensing module. So please, whatever you do not wait until the day your taxes are due to start this process.
Now, I did mention paying. During Step 3, you are required to pay a one-time, non-refundable fee of $60 through an electronic bank transfer. But hey, there's great news here. Unlike a lot of other states that nickel and dime you, Wyoming does not require you to constantly renew this permit and pay ongoing fees every year. Once you're licensed, your permit stays active as long as you maintain good standing and actually file your returns.
Now, while that digital YIFS portal is absolutely the most efficient route, you technically can submit a paper application form by mail along with a physical check if you really prefer the old-school method. It's called Form 41-1, and it requires original wet ink signatures from the business owners. But honestly, unless you have a super specific reason, just stick to the online portal. It is faster, it's way more secure, and it completely eliminates the chance of common handwriting or mailing errors.
Let's dive into Section 4, Costly Mistakes to Avoid. The application itself is straightforward enough, but the pitfalls? Yeah, fixing those later can be a massive headache. The single biggest mistake is simply waiting too long to register after you cross that $100,000 threshold. That completely exposes your business to accumulating back taxes and some pretty hefty penalties. But here is another massive trap: forgetting to file 0 returns. Listen closely to this one. Even if you have a month where you literally make 0 sales in Wyoming, you still have to file a return stating that you made 0 sales. If you just skip it, the state will assume you forgot to pay, and they will hit you with penalties or even revoke your license.
Also, do not misunderstand how marketplace rules work. If you exclusively sell on a done-for-you platform like Amazon or Etsy, they actually handle the tax collection for you. But the very second you adopt a do-it-yourself approach and sell directly through your own Shopify store, you need your own Wyoming permit. This is due to the marketplace facilitator law. It's super helpful, sure, but if your business uses a hybrid model, let's say 80% of your sales are on Amazon and 20% are on your own website, you still absolutely need that permit for the 20% you sell directly once you cross the threshold.
All right, Section 5. What happens next?
So you've completely avoided the mistakes and you've submitted the application. How do you actually operate as a newly licensed vendor? Well, processing usually takes about 1 to 10 business days. After that, the state will assign you a specific filing frequency, monthly, quarterly, or annually. Your immediate action? Start collecting taxes at the correct destination rate right away. That means the tax rate you charge is based on where your customer receives the product, not where your business headquarters is located. And for your long-term sanity, keep all your receipts, invoices, and exemption certificates for at least 4 years. The state can audit your returns within a 3-year window, and they can go back even further if they suspect you haven't been filing.
Finally, Section 6, Final Tips and Disclaimer. We are right at the finish line, so let's wrap up with exactly where to go if you get stuck. Make sure you bookmark the Department of Revenue's Excise Tax Division website for official FAQs, and remember to use ETS Form 101 if you ever end up making tax-exempt sales to other businesses. For example, if you're a wholesaler selling your goods to a retailer, they have to provide you with a valid exemption certificate so you don't charge them sales tax. Without that specific certificate on file, you could end up footing the bill yourself during a random audit, and nobody wants that.
Look, managing sales tax is definitely not a set-it-and-forget-it task, but being proactive is your absolute best defense. The huge takeaway here is to get your registration completely sorted out before you face any nasty penalties. Drop a comment below if this step-by-step breakdown helped clear up the confusion for you. And don't forget to subscribe. Staying ahead of tax compliance allows you to stop worrying and focus on what you actually love doing, growing your business and serving your customers. As we close out, please read our standard disclaimer. This video is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or financial advice. Please consult with a professional advisor or attorney for specific guidance concerning your business's needs. Now that you're totally armed with the facts, I've got one last question to leave you with. If your business suddenly doubled in size tomorrow, would your current tax compliance strategy protect you or sink you? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Stay compliant out there and never let a little paperwork keep you from building something truly great.